Well, good morning, everyone. So good to be here at the Feast of Tabernacles. All the smiling faces. When I first started keeping the feast, almost every feast started with the question, why are we here? Anybody ever heard that question? Thundered. Everybody heard that question. Well, I want to pose the question, how did we get here? And where are we going? Now, I've been to a lot of Feast of Tabernacles. I'm gonna give some age away here. My first 12 or 13 Feast of Tabernacles were spent camping at Big Sandy, Texas. Now, how many of you guys have camped at Big Sandy, Texas? A few. I don't remember you. My first Feast of Tabernacles, I was 16 years old, and I camped in an army tent with another young man in the church. And of course, our parents were there, and we ate with them and stuff. But when you're young, that age, living at home, feast preparation is pretty easy. You just do what you're told. But as you get older and babies start coming into your life, then preparation becomes a little bit more difficult. So I was married in 1971, and 10 months later, Jason was born. And so the 1972 feast, he was between 2 and 3 months old. If you've ever stayed in a tent with a 2 or 3 month old, that's not what we're experiencing here. It's a little different. A year later, Kelly was born. And so that year I had a 1-year-old and a 3-month-old at the feast, staying in a tent. Campfire, Coleman lanterns, all that stuff. Pretty interesting. In 1974, Jason was 2 and mobile. And so we're in the piney woods with 8,000 campers, and my 2-year-old wanders off. So what do? 3 lots this way, 3 lots that way. Well, how'd we find him? We found him. It took about an hour and a half. But you went to your captain of 10, who went to the captain of 50, who went to the captain of 100, who went to the captain of 1,000, and the word goes out. And then you find your baby boy. And a little shamefaced, how did you let your 2-year-old... Unless you've had 2-year-olds, then they can go fast. Preparing for the feast. Boy, even preparing for this feast, here I'm giving a sermon on preparation, and I forgot my cufflinks. I forgot my ties. I was catching a ride from the office to the airport, and I wanted my Bible that was on my office desk because it had bigger print, but I forgot to get it. So I need more practice preparing for the feast. But back then, preparing for a camp out, now Big Sandy and Dallas is about 120 miles from each other, but 120 miles was a long ways for us. So the first thing we did with our second tithe every year is we bought a set of retreads to go on the car so that we could make that 120-mile journey. And then we would pack up our rusted-out hood Ford Fairlane with all the camping gear and throw the kids in, and off we went. Tents, tarps, carpets, chairs, lanterns, pump-up lanterns, Coleman stove, pump-up Coleman stove, sleeping bags, clothes for cold, clothes for wet, clothes for dry, clothes for warm. It was a lot of work. We learned to use checklists, and we learned to prepare. It required a lot of planning and a lot of execution on the plan. Money was in short supply. I was a conscientious objector. I was on the 1W program, so I was working for the city of Dallas as a garbage man. I made a whopping $83 a week. 2 small kids, So our second tithe was just south of $1,000, and that's after I worked part-time selling cookware, all right? But I share that because it was some of the best feast that you can imagine. 8,000 people in the Piney Woods, another 3 or 4 in Lake Loma campgrounds. We're in a gigantic tabernacle, which is a fancy word for a metal building with an asphalt floor and no air conditioning. If you've ever been there, you were there. I wasn't in Big Sandy when they had the big tent or when they met at the Redwood. That was before my time. But getting ready for the feast, we even had work parties before the feast where we would go up there and clear the campgrounds, chop down little trees, and get ready for the feast. A lot of service opportunities. You had the captain system where you had the opportunity to serve. They had security detail every night, so it was running 2-hour shifts where 2 guys would, with their little flashlights, go up and down the streets, making sure everybody was safe and secure. Restroom cleaning detail. Boy, when you got 12,000 people using bathhouses, they can get trashed pretty quick. So, everybody got to serve. Everybody got to do some work. If the rains came in Big Sandy, tents would fall down, rain would go under the tents, everybody's stuff would get wet. And so there was opportunities to help, keep the trenches flowing and everything, and to serve. Because, when you have somebody that's in need, all their stuff sopping wet, then everybody else just pitches in. And, it was like a big family. It really was. The nightlife was amazing. I mean, you had sing-alongs and campfires, and you're walking down these streets, and you can't go 3 or 4 camp spaces before somebody comes out and tries to give you something to eat or give you something to drink or invite you in. It was such an experience, and I would not trade that for anything. But the feast wasn't easy. It was a lot of work, but it was very, very fulfilling. Every year we got better. We got more and more camping gear, and eventually we were able to toss the pump-up kerosene stuff, and we went high dollar, and we had propane lanterns and propane stoves, and we thought we were in tall cotton at that point. And we made a lot of mistakes at the feast. Sometimes we would play too much. Sometimes we would eat too much. Sometimes we would stay up too late. We just, did everything. But every year, you learn. You get older. You get more mature. You learn what not to do. You learn more what to do. And you get better prepared, experienced. And so we learned that you get out of the feast what you put into the feast. And so to have a good feast, you got to give a good feast. And, when you're in your early 20s going to the feast, our heads were, all about, having fun and partying, doing all that kind of stuff. But you learn. We matured and we learned how to serve and how giving gives joy and gives a kind of fulfillment that you'll never get just by serving yourself. So it was an opportunity. It wasn't easy, but it was fulfilling. For this feast, I hope you guys prepared better than I did. But you had to start planning. You had to start, where am I going to stay? What am I going to do? What are we going to eat? What are we going to wear? You had to make all these plans, right? And then you had to execute on the plans, and I know you did it fairly well because we're all here, right? So my dad always said, proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Now, he was a Marine. I think that's where it came from because I see some giggles out there. But it's it's true. So we're not here at the feast just to enjoy ourselves. We are here to give a good feast and to serve people the best way that we can. Now, back in the late 60s, we were excited, we were confident, we knew that the time of the end was at hand. And we had to prepare because we did not want to be stuck in that nasty tribulation. We had to get ready. We were excited. But then 1972 came, 1972 went, and nothing happened. And people began to be less and less excited. A lot of people quit. The hyper growth that we had experienced slowed way, way down, and things began to change. We had new speculations. Now, they were way more general now because we had got caught in the trap of putting a date on a prophecy that never happened, and that can be discouraging, right? And that's kind of what happened. A lot of people left. The church started to fracture, one split after another. Now, 30 years later, how many people have passed through the churches of God? And how many are left? How many quit? How many just gave up for one reason or another? How many are left and looking forward? Where's that zeal, that excitement that we had when we were outrunning the tribulation, right? How many AC grads? You know, we put AC grads up on a big pedestal. Man, they knew everything, could teach us everything. But now you look at how many people graduated from AC that just tossed in the hat. You know, they're done. I want to talk about Navy SEAL training. Navy SEALs have a thing called ringing the bell. That's where the title of the sermon came from. Will you ring the bell? Now, in Navy SEAL training, there's a lot of guys sign up for Navy SEAL training that don't even get started. As a matter of fact, they have a pre-conditioning camp, and only 79% of the people that make it, that started that first preliminary part of the training, only 79% of the people make it to where they can sign their recruiting papers. So a lot of them, 21%, are gone before they even get started. So after they sign their enlistment papers, they have to graduate. Those that graduate recruit training. 50% of the ones left graduate recruit training, and that leaves 45% of the ones that started. Those that complete SEAL pre-indoctrination, 90% of the ones left complete that, which means only 41% of those that started. And then it gets fun. They go into BUDS training, basic underwater demolition. 33%, 2/3 of the people wash out at BUDS training. Only 11% are left. Now I want to give you an idea of BUDS training. The last week is called Hell Week, and they put people through some pressure. Instead of describing it, I just want to read this to you. It says, Hell Week is the defining event of BUDS training. It's held early on. In the third week of the first phase, before the Navy makes an expensive investment in SEAL operational training. Hell Week consists of 5.5 days of cold, wet, brutally difficult operational training on fewer than 4 hours of sleep. Hell Week tests physical endurance, mental toughness, pain and cold tolerance, teamwork, attitude, and your ability to perform work under high physical and mental stress and sleep deprivation. Above all, it tests determination and desire. On average, only 25% of SEAL candidates make it through Hell Week, It's the toughest training the U.S. military. It is often the greatest achievements of their lives. Over the years, this is important, research has been done to determine a common trait in those individuals who make it through Hell Week. But there's no definitive answer. It's not necessarily the largest, it's not necessarily the strongest, it's not the fastest swimmers, but those with a burning desire to be SEALs. The instructors have observed the only one true predictor of which candidates will ultimately succeed are those who want it the most. Trainees are constantly in motion, swimming, paddling, carrying boats on their heads, doing log PT, sit-ups, push-ups, rolling in the sand, slogging through the mud, paddling boats, and doing surf passage. Being still can be just as challenging when you're standing interminably in formation, soaking wet on the beach or up to your waist in the water, with the cold ocean wind cutting through you. Mud covers uniforms, hands, faces, everything but the eyes. The sand chafes the raw skin. The salt water makes cuts, burns. Students perform evolutions that require them to think, lead, make sound decisions, and functionally operate when they're extremely sleep-deprived, approaching hypothermia, and even hallucinating. While trainees get plenty to eat, some are so fatigued they fall asleep in their food. Others fall asleep while paddling boats and have to be pulled out of the water by teammates. Pretty rough stuff. SEAL candidates commonly have the mistaken belief that Hell Week and BUD/S are all about physical strength. Actually, it's as much mental as it is physical. Trainees just decide that they're too cold, it's too sandy, too sore, too tired to go on. It's their minds that give up on them, not their bodies. While instructors could get anyone to quit if they wanted to, that's not what they're after. They apply great physical and mental stress, sow the seeds of doubt, and give tempting invitations for trainees to quit. But it's up to the individual student to either turn it into increased resolve or decide on his own to quit. The majority of the students who make it through Hell Week go on to graduate BUD/S and become SEALs, having survived that severe trial. They feel literally unstoppable. So their instructors are playing with their minds. They're planting doubts. They're talking to that inner self. Quit. Ring the bell. They make it honorable. Just quit. Just ring the bell. Have some coffee. Have some donuts. Watch your class continue to suffer. Just ring the bell. You know you want to. You know you want to quit. You know you're hurting. Just ring the bell. To quit and make the pain stop. We all have to deal with that. There was one guy named David Goggins who was a serious, tough guy. He went through Hell Week 3 times in a row. He wouldn't quit. They didn't graduate him, but he wouldn't quit. 3 weeks of that. So after initial training, something interesting happens. They start a 24-month cycle. 18 months of additional training, 6 months of deployment. They do that 24-month cycle all the time they're a Navy SEAL. 18 months of training, 6 months of deployments. 18 months of training, 6 months of deployment. So they never, ever stop training. The common denominators are just they want it. They won't quit. Turn over to Ephesians chapter 6, Ephesians 6 and verse 11. Just like an elite soldier prepares for battle, brethren, we have to prepare daily for our spiritual battle. So, familiar scripture here. Verse 11 says, "Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand before the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Stand therefore, having girded your waist with truth, having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and having shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Above all, taking the shield of faith, with which you will be able to quench all the fiery darts of the wicked one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying always with all prayer and supplication in the Spirit, being watchful to this end with all perseverance and supplication for the saints." So, brethren, a Navy SEAL has to learn how to use his weapons. Some are offensive, some are defensive. In this list, beginning with truth, we have to learn to use the weapons that Jehovah has provided us to be prepared. Truth, it begins with truth. Righteousness, acting on the truth. Practicing, application. Shod your feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. Taking the shield of faith. If we don't believe we can make it, we're not going to make it. If we don't believe that Jehovah will fight our battles, if we don't believe that he's going to give us the strength, we will ring the bell. We have to have the faith, the helmet of salvation. You know, we're saved. As long as we're in motion, as long as we're making progress, as long as we believe, we're saved. And the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Let's turn over to 1 Corinthians and verse 9. Chapter 9, verse 24. 1 Corinthians 9 and verse 24. "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it into subjection, lest when I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified." Let's go to Mark 13 now. Mark 13 and verse 33. Mark 13:33. "Take heed, watch, and pray, for you do not know when the time is. It's like a man going to a far country who left his house and gave authority to his servants to each his work and commanded the doorkeeper to watch. Watch therefore, for you do not know when the master of the house is coming, in the evening, at midnight, at the crowing of the rooster, or in the morning, lest coming suddenly he find you sleeping. And what I say to you, I say to all, watch." Watch. 2 Timothy, chapter 2, 2 Timothy 2 and verse 3. This is the verse that the song "Onward Christian Soldiers" was taken from. It says, "You therefore must endure hardship as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No one engaged in warfare entangles himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who enlisted him as a soldier." As members of the ecclesia at the feast 2021, how did we get here? How did we come to be part of the ecclesia? Well, brethren, we got recruited. That's how it all started. We got recruited. Turn to John chapter 6 and verse 41 John 6:41. Says, the Jews then complained about him because he said, I am the bread which came down from heaven. And they said, is not this Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How is it then that he says, I have come down from heaven? Jesus therefore answered and said to them, do not murmur among yourselves. No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him. And I will raise him up in the last day. It is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by God. Therefore, everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me. Then, brethren, after we were recruited, we counseled. We considered our options. We were given some scriptures. We were told to count the cost. Turn over to Luke 14, verse 28. For which of you, Luke 14 and verse 28, for which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest, after he's laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going to make war against another does not sit down first and consider whether he is able with 10,000 to meet him who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. So likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. Now, I remember my baptismal counseling. I was riding around security during services with a local elder, Jack Campbell, and we kept all those people safe while they were in there listening to services. But it was, a couple of hours of baptismal counseling, and that happened two or three times that week. But it was, you better know what you're jumping into here. You better be ready. Don't start this if you're not ready to make it all the way through. So, brethren, we were educated. We were indoctrinated. Then we were baptized. Hands laid on us. We received the Holy Spirit. We thought we had it made, but training was just beginning. Through study, prayer, meditation, and application. Turn over to 1 Samuel 16. We all started with different backgrounds. Some appeared to have more advantages than others. But you can't really look, just like at the Navy SEAL, you can't really tell who's going to finish the race. This story kind of points that out. 1 Samuel 16 and verse 1. Now Jehovah said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, saying I've rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I'm sending you to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided myself a king among his sons. And Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hears it, he'll kill me. But Jehovah said, take a heifer with you and say, I've come to sacrifice to Jehovah. Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I'll show you what you shall do. You shall anoint for me the one I name to you. So Samuel did what Jehovah said. He went to Bethlehem, and the elders of the town trembled at his coming and said, do you come in peace? He said, peaceably. I've come to sacrifice to Jehovah. Sanctify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons, invited them to the sacrifice. So it was when they came that he looked to Eliab and said, surely Jehovah's anointed is before him. But Jehovah said, do not look at his appearance or his physical stature, because I have refused him. For Jehovah does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but Jehovah looks at the heart. So Jesse called Abinadab and made him pass before Samuel. neither has Jehovah chosen this one. And Jesse made Shammah pass by. He said, neither has Jehovah chosen this one. Thus Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said to Jesse, Jehovah has not chosen these. Samuel said to Jesse, are all the young men here? And he said, there remains yet the youngest, and there he is, keeping the sheep. And Samuel said to Jesse, send him and bring him, for he will not sit down till he comes here. So he sent and brought him in, and now he was ruddy, with bright eyes and good looking. And Jehovah said, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers. And the Spirit of Jehovah came upon David from that day forward. So Samuel arose and went to Ramah. Now, Samuel couldn't tell by looking. I mean, he knew Jehovah. He talked to him. He knew he couldn't tell by looking. And you think about young David, the shepherd boy. I just got anointed king. I just won the lottery. Wow. But then you look at what David went through over the next 15 years, being tracked down, with Saul determined to eliminate him. And you look at how he had to live with his band in the wilderness. 15 years of training before he became king. Think of Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers. You look at all that he went through, being falsely accused and being imprisoned and all that before he rose to prominence, before he was used by Jehovah. So on our journey, brethren, we began to experience trials. And as our trials, as we progressed, our trials became more and more intense, more difficult, testing us. Will we ring the bell? Will we ring the bell? That's what Hell Week is all about. Turn over to Leviticus 23 and verse 41. Leviticus 23 and verse 41. I think James read this yesterday. You shall keep it as a feast to Jehovah for 7 days in the year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. You'll celebrate it in the 7th month. You'll dwell in booths for 7 days. All who are native Israelites shall dwell in booths, that your generations may know that I made the children of Israel dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. So Moses declared to the children of Israel the feast of Jehovah. So why? It's to remind us, brethren, of the journey, to remind us of the challenges, the difficulties, the planning, the sacrifice, the pain, and the suffering that's a part of the journey. 40 years in the wilderness. Out of all the people, you remember when they left Egypt? They left with a high hand. They plundered their neighbors. They left with enormous wealth. And yet, how many of those people made it to the promised land? It was just 2. Joshua and Caleb. There was a big fallout rate. Big fallout rate. Let's go to Job. When it comes to trials, you can't skip trials without talking about Job. Job 1 and verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright, and one who feared God and shunned evil. So this guy had reached a pretty high level of self-control, right? Verse 8, then Jehovah said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God, shuns evil. So Satan answered Jehovah and said, does Job fear God for nothing? Have you not made a hedge around him, around his household, and around all that he has on every side? You've blessed the work of his hands. His possessions have increased in the land. But now stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And Jehovah said to Satan, behold, All that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of Jehovah. Verse number 13. Now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And a messenger came to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys feeding beside them when the Sabaeans raided them and took them away. Indeed, they have killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, the Chaldeans formed 3 bands, raided the camels, and took them away, and yes, killed the servants with the edge of the sword. I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, another also came and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and suddenly a great wind came from across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the house, and it fell on the young people, and they're dead. I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose, he tore his robe, shaved his head, he fell to the ground, and he worshiped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. Jehovah gave, and Jehovah has taken away. Blessed be the name of Jehovah. In all this, Job did not sin nor charge God with wrong. Chapter 2, in verse 1, we see the second set of attacks and trials. Chapter 2, verse 1. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before Jehovah. Satan came also among them to present himself before Jehovah. And Jehovah said to Satan, from where do you come? So Satan answered Jehovah and said, from going to and from on the earth, and from walking back and forth on it. Then Jehovah said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man, who fears God, shuns evil, and still he holds fast to his integrity, although you incited me against him to destroy him without a cause. So Satan answered Jehovah and said, skin for skin. Yes, all that a man has he will give for his life. But stretch out your hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he'll surely curse you to your face. And Jehovah said to Satan, behold, he's in your hand, but spare his life. So Satan went out from the presence of Jehovah and struck Job with painful boils from the sole of his foot to the crown of his head. And he took for himself a potsherd with which to scrape himself while he sat in the midst of the ashes. So he had a tough time. Can you really kind of picture yourself, which is one wave after another coming at you, and before you can catch your breath, you get smacked with something else and something else, something else. Job is in pain. He's in physical pain. He's in emotional pain. He's in every kind of pain, every kind of fear, every kind of anxiety, everything that we could possibly imagine, it's been thrown at him. And then he gets advice from his wife in verse 9. It says, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Then his wife said to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? She says, ring the bell. Curse God and die. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we indeed accept good from God, and shall we not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. And then you have, following that, the very painful chapters of his friends accusing him over and over. You know you deserve this. You know you had it coming. You know you've got hidden sin, and just, he's suffering from fatigue, sleep deprivation. I think of the Navy SEALs operating on 3.5 hours of sleep a night, and then physically moving all the time, until they're hallucinating and falling asleep in their plate. You know, that's where Job was when he gets advice from his friends. Yet, after that, he got to talk to Jehovah face on. And through all of that, he didn't ring the bell. He hung in there. He made it through Hell Week. And maybe that was Hell Week 4 times instead of 3 times. But he made it through. He completed his training. The last chapters of Job are much happier than how the book began. Then look at Paul's trials. He kind of sums it up. Go to 2 Corinthians 11. 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 23. Paul does a little rant here. He says, "Are they ministers of Christ? I speak as a fool. I'm more. In labors more abundant. In stripes above measure. In prisons more frequently. In deaths often. From the Jews 5 times I received 40 stripes minus 1. 3 times I was beaten with rods. Once I was stoned. 3 times I was shipwrecked. A night and a day I've been in the deep. In journeys often. In perils of water. Perils of robbers. In perils of my own countrymen. In perils of the Gentiles. In perils in the city. Perils in the wilderness. Perils in the sea. In perils among false brethren. In weariness and toil. In sleeplessness often. In hunger and thirst. In fastings often. In cold and nakedness. Besides the other thing which comes upon me daily, my deep concern for all the churches." That's some serious training, brethren. That is some serious training. Consider what Christ endured for us. Christ willingly submitted to horrible, terrible, painful, emotionally exhausting, depleting, unimaginable suffering for us. Let's turn to 1 Peter in verse 2. 1 Peter, chapter 2 and verse 20. 1 Peter 2 and verse 20. "For what credit is it when you are beaten for your faults, you've taken it patiently? But when you do good and suffer, if you take it patiently, this is commendable before God. For to this you were called, because Christ also suffered for us, leaving us an example that you should follow his steps, who committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth, who when he was reviled did not revile in return, when he suffered he did not threaten, but committed himself to him who judges righteously, who himself bore our sins in his own body on the tree, that we, having died to sins, might live for righteousness, by whose stripes you were healed. By whose stripes you were healed." Brethren, we will face trials. I wish they were all behind us, but they're not. Sometimes it's going to be like Hell Week. If we're not in a serious trial right now, then you're in a time of training. Just like the Navy SEALs. They get 18 months of training, 6 months of deployment. If you're not in a trial right now, you will be. You will be. And anytime we want the trials to stop, we just ring the bell. Just go along with the crowd. Ring the bell. Persecution starts slowly, begins to grow. Just ring the bell. The temptation to go along to get along. Ring the bell. Blend in, become invisible. Don't stand out. Ring the bell. The problem is that we're called to be a light. We are called to stand out. But that's scary. That draws attention. Matthew 5, verse 14, Matthew 5 and verse 14. You are the light of the world, a city that is set on a hill and cannot be hidden. Nor do they light a lamp and put it under a basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven. So, brethren, we have to ask ourselves, what's our weakness? Where are we vulnerable? The Navy SEALs train with that question. Where are we vulnerable? What's a threat? What do I need to learn? What do I need to do? I got a little flat spot in the road. It's smooth, but it's not going to stay smooth forever. I need to prepare. What do I need to prepare for? What's ahead? I want to tell you a story. When I was 14, 15 years old, I had an uncle that lived in Happy, Texas. And I got to go out and spend the summers out in Happy, Texas. I found out Toby lives not too far away from Happy, Texas. So, but he was a rodeo guy. And so when I got out there to spend the summers, I got to learn how to rope. Started out learning how to rope a 5-gallon bucket. And then I graduated to a fence post. And then he had a bunch of goats that use goats to train horses and to practice your roping skills, because goats are a lot faster than calves. And so I learned how to. I was a real live goat roper. I've ran around and roping goats for practice. But all those skills, all those rodeo skills, they're developed from a time in the past when you herded cows and you had to go through the process. Now I've always I was thinking about this one time talking to James and at his house and just thinking about that poor calf. He's born into the world and he's all happy. He's got his mama's milk and he's just hanging out with the herd and everything's good. And then one day, this cowboy on a cutting horse moves him off from the herd. He tries to get around him, and the horse is fast. He goes this way, goes this way. So the cow just takes off, running. And so then all of a sudden, he's got a rope around his neck. And he's slammed to the ground. The cowboy jumps off, and he picks him up, slams him down, wraps up his legs. And then here comes a guy with a hot branding iron. And sometimes in the process, he gets to experience a gender change. His life's never, ever going to be the same. He just wanted to hang out with the herd. That's all he wanted. Now you think about that. We also, as people, we crave a connection with other people. We want to be part of the herd. But we're not cut out of the herd like a cowboy with a cutting horse. We have to willingly leave the herd, sometimes painfully, but we have to choose to leave. A lot of people make the wrong choice. When Worldwide gave up all of God's laws, a lot of people just couldn't give up the herd. They'd rather stay with the herd than leave. A lot of people left over God of the Old Testament. They admitted what the truth was. They understood it completely, but just decided that the herd was more important than the truth. So we have that same proclivity to be connected to people, but who does Jehovah want us to be connected to? Turn over to Luke 14. Luke 14 and verse 25. Luke 14:25. Now great multitudes went with him, and he turned and said to them, If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother and wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. We have to be willing to leave our herd and put Jehovah first. Who's our real herd? Well, Christ tells us that in Matthew 12 and verse 46. Matthew 12 and verse 46 says, while he was still talking to the multitudes, behold, his mother and brother stood outside seeking to speak with him. Then one said to him, look, your mother and your brothers are standing outside and seeking to speak with you. But he answered and said to the one who told him, who is my brother, who is my mother, and who are my brothers? And he stretched out his hand towards his disciples and said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. So that's our herd, is whoever obeys Jehovah. Whoever is connected to Jehovah, that's who we are to connect with. So in the church, our herd got smaller. It split again, and it got smaller. It split again, and it split again, and it split again. The Big Sandy Feast was once 12,000 people strong. Song service, 12,000 people singing. And yet, it's a different situation now. It's not what feels good that counts, brethren. It's what is good. It's what Jehovah says is good. And sometimes we have to give up what feels good. Does this mean sometimes we're going to feel alone? We're going to feel isolated? We're going to feel different? We're going to feel outcast? Well, turn to 1 Kings 19 and verse 1. 1 Kings 19 and verse 1. Now, this is right after Elijah had put the prophets of Baal to death, and Jezebel's not real happy about it. And so, 1 Kings 19, verse 1, and Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah, saying, so let the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow, about this time. And when he saw that, he arose and he ran for his life. And he went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and he left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and he came and he sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die, and said, it is enough. Now, Jehovah, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Verse 14. And he said, I've been very zealous for Jehovah, God of hosts, because the children of Israel has forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they seek to take my life. Then Jehovah said to him, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you arrive, had some work for him to do. Anoint Hazael king over Syria. Also you shall anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, king over Israel, and Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Maholah, you shall anoint as prophet in your place. It shall be that whoever escapes the sword of Hazael, Jehu will kill, and whoever escapes the sword of Jehu, Elijah will kill. Yet I have reserved 7,000 in Israel, all whose knees have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. And on top of all that, then we have to love our enemies as ourselves. Matthew 5, brethren. Matthew 5 and verse 43. You've heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Brethren, training isn't always easy. Sometimes it's like going through Hell Week. It's all we can do to hold on. And yet, we're guaranteed the strength. We are guaranteed the strength to get through. The common denominators of those who endure, well, God looks on the heart. It's those that want it. It's those that just want it. No matter what happens, they won't ring the bell. Matthew 22:14, real quick, just as many are called, few are chosen. Look at the attrition rate. Matthew 7:13, enter by the narrow gate. These are scriptures that have already been read. For wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction. There are many who go in by it, because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life. There are few who find it. Of all the people that sign up for Navy SEAL training, 9.5% become Navy SEALs. Over 90% fall out. Over 90%. Most people will take the easy path. But brethren, that is not the journey that we are called to. It is not the easy path. What's in it for us if we hang in there? What is in it for us if we refuse to ring the bell? If we just keep making progress? Turn over to 1 John 3. 1 John 3 and verse 1. Behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed on us, that we should be called children of God. Therefore the world does not know us, because it did not know him. Beloved, we are children of God, and it has not yet been revealed what we shall be. But we know that when he's revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. And everyone who has this hope in him purifies himself as he is pure. Romans 8 and verse 12. Romans 8 and verse 12. Therefore, brethren, we are debtors, not to the flesh, to live according to the flesh. For if you live according to the flesh, you'll die. But if by the Spirit you put to death the deeds of the body, you will live. For as many as are led by the Spirit of God, these are the sons of God. For you did not receive the spirit of bondage again to fear, but you received the spirit of adoption, by whom we cry out, Abba, Father. The Spirit bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And if children, then heirs, heirs of God, and joint heirs with Christ, if indeed we suffer with him, that we may also be glorified together. For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. For the earnest expectation of the creation eagerly awaits for the revealing of the sons of God. But if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with perseverance. Will you ring the bell? Will I ring the bell? We will be tried. We will be tested. We will be sifted. We will be trained. This calling is for the elite. Whatever our weaknesses are, they will be exploited. They will be tested. That's where the adversary will attack us. We will be refined. We will be transformed. James 1, verse 2, real familiar scripture. I always got a giggle out of this one. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. Serious trial? Smile. 1 Peter 1, a few pages over, 1 Peter 1 and verse 6. In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you've been grieved by various trials, that the genuineness of your faith, being much more precious than gold that perishes, though it is tested by fire, may be found to praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen, you love. Though now you do not see him, yet believing, you rejoice with joy inexpressible and full of glory, receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Therefore, gird up the loins of your mind, be sober, and rest your hope fully upon the grace that is to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. And as obedient children, not conforming yourselves to the former lust as in your ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, because it is written, be holy, for I am holy. And if you call on the Father, who without partiality judges according to each one's work, conduct yourselves throughout the time of your stay here in fear, knowing that you were not redeemed with corruptible things like silver or gold, but from your aimless conduct received by tradition from your fathers, but with the precious blood of Christ, as of a lamb, without blemish and without spot. What we practice in private, we are rewarded for in public. But there is no doubt, brethren, we are in a battle. We may lose a few rounds. We may get knocked down over and over. We may get discouraged, lonely, depressed. But we got to keep getting back up. We got to keep getting back up. Keep training. Keep coming back. Determined to finish the race. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. Brethren, now is the time to prepare.